That's what I like to hear. The consumer healthcare industry fighting fit, ready to conquer the world. So New Directions is a weekly newsletter, and as it says here, it's where innovation meets regulation. And we're going to talk about a whole number of topics today which are connected with science, with regulatory, with new product development, with niches like medical devices. We'll get into a little bit about topics like smoking cessation, very briefly. It's going to be a great day. It's our first in this series in a hotel where we visited, where we had our London conference in 2013. And as I see so many friends in the room, you won't mind me just reminding ourselves, and it really is a reminder to ourselves, that our company was started 40 years ago. We forgot when we were 25 years of age. We just about remembered when we were 30, so we actually planned well in advance to celebrate the 40th. So this is a year of constant celebrations for us. So as many of you have been to our recent conferences, and I see a number of you who were with us in Barcelona earlier this year, some of this will be a little repetitive, but I've cut in some new material. In this keynote speech, which will last for 1 hour, I'm joined by my colleague Ekaterina Panteleva, our Group Vice President for Consultancy, who will take the second half of the meeting to talk specifically about probiotics. And our network partners at Be My Eye have done some proprietary research, which is going to be introduced by Steph Kulik this morning, which will give some additional information and opinion on the probiotics market, and I'll let Steph explain how that is. Now, when we met before, many of us in Barcelona, and even one or two of you when we met in New Jersey in June, you know that my particular hobby horse, to use an English expression, is that when we think about growth, of which, frankly, we don't seem to have a lot in the OTC market, one of the explanations is that we're not actually looking in the right place. And that if we define the market in the traditional way, which is a pharmacy market with some countries seeing consumer health, or OTC as we used to call it, moving into mass market and convenience, if we describe that as pharmacy plus, it's a very narrow definition. And innovation, as we'll see in a moment, is more than just new products. Although today we are very focused on new products, and we have an innovation fair next door. So we know that if we look at the market in a more broad sense, if we look at additional channels of distribution, including multi-level, Amway, Avon and the like, and the e-pharmacy, e-commerce part of the market, already our market is about 50% bigger. Now, I wish I could give you a precise figure. My colleague Kaylee is here, who manages DB6, and we really wish we had robust data on these additional channels of distribution. We will get there, we're just not there yet. And that's because this is such a poorly audited sector. But we are talking to all our data suppliers and audit companies and market research partners to try to get some reliable data on e-pharmacy, or more broadly e-commerce and multi-level. But that's a 2-year project which is underway. But we have a rough estimation of what the market is outside of Pharmacy Plus. And it's as I say, it adds about another 50%. And with the plans that this industry has to broaden the definition into new categories, into the adjacencies as we call them, and to streamline our marketing techniques, including being more innovative, then the expectation is that our market on the current methodology has a growth potential of about 5.5% a year, compared with historic 4.5%, as we'll see in a moment. But if we can achieve the new paradigm, which is bringing in the adjacencies, bringing in the medicated skincare, the oral care, certain parts of the hair care market, certain parts of the nutritionals market, but still focused on health, not on beauty, then in fact we have the potential, as these are faster growing parts of the market, to achieve a 10% growth rate. So, OTC New Directions, and we're going to be changing the name of that next year to Consumer Healthcare New Directions, is all about where innovation meets regulation. So what is innovation? And that's such an obvious question, and normally achieves such a simple answer. Innovation comes from a Greek word adopted into Latin that means new. But what is it we mean when we talk about doing something differently, new? It's always thought of in terms of better products. And as I said before, product is at the heart of what we do in one respect. Of course, the consumer has to be really at the heart of our industry. But the fact of the matter is that innovation is more than just product. It's everything that we do. It's how we define the market in terms of segments. It's how we manage our portfolio, how we bring in additional products in licensing and acquisition, the price points that we set, the value chain that we create, the margins that we offer to our partners. All of this is part of the search for innovation. It can be the way that we communicate. It can be the way that we channel sales through wider distribution. It can be Salesforce strategies. Our company does a lot of work in Salesforce effectiveness. It can be addressing new geographies, although I have to say in our 40 years we've seen this market become fully global. I can remember only 15 years ago trying to persuade a top multinational that it was worth investing in India. And I remember that then, and it was the early days of what we now think of as Pfizer, although all those brands went to Johnson & Johnson. I can remember Mark Robinson, the president of Pfizer Consumer, the old Pfizer Consumer, all those brands are now in Johnson & Johnson, saying, come to New Jersey and persuade me I should be in India. It seems amazing that we had to have that conversation 15 years ago. Now there is no question, it's just, can we get the pricing right? Can we get the distribution strategy right? There is no argument about geographical expansion as there was in the past. But most importantly, innovation is about the holistic business model. And the most successful companies in this industry, the ones with the highest growth, and we'll see a few of them in a moment, are the companies that are searching for and achieving new business models. Whether it's USP in Poland, Genoma in Mexico, other companies around the world who we will see in a moment, it's finding a new way of explaining your products to the consumer, a new way of buying your media more cheaply, moving to social media. Not that we are entirely persuaded that that's the right strategy, but it is an alternative, it is a form of innovation. But of course, we continue to think of innovation in terms of formulations, ingredients, combinations, switches, higher strength products, delivery systems, and adjacent categories. So, when we look at the numbers, and the latest data set is for our database DB6, the half-year figures will be out Monday or Tuesday of next week. We're just finalizing them now, but we have a very good idea of how the market is performing, and not well. When we look historically, the market globally has grown at 4.5% in value, and in volume, 2.7%. So there we see that organic growth, if we can equate volume with organic growth, is about half of the market growth. The other half is price increase, but even within that, we have some brands growing in price, some declining in price through generic competition or private label, or aggressive retailers who insist that we cut our prices. In 2018, we hold to our forecast that the market will grow slightly less than the historical average at about 4.4%. That's still a little bit higher than the All Commodity Index as published by IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Again, and you've heard me say this before, many of you, the consumer will find an extra amount of money to buy consumer healthcare products to keep on the go, because our industry is all about prevention of illness. But it's a difficult story to tell. The forecast for the next 5 years is of perhaps slightly increasing growth at 4.7%. But I know from all the work we've done with investors, we've twice spoken at JP Morgan, and investors are cautious about our market, whether external shareholders, whether hedge funds, whether companies looking to make acquisition. The question is, why should we invest in your industry when it's about to fall off a cliff? And the fact of the matter is, we're not going to fall off a cliff. We're not like Big Pharma, which faces the cliff when its patents expire. Our brands go on forever. I used to work on the Vicks, when I worked at Richardson Vicks, I worked on the Vicks Vapor Rub business, and it's now 175 years old as a brand. And that's not old. There are Japanese and German brands of 200, 300, and 400 years of consumer healthcare existence. But we have to explain to our owners, our investors, our parent companies, whoever, that this is an industry that is worth investing in. It can deliver growth, top line, and profit growth, bottom line. But to do that, we have to innovate, and that's what today's conference, the first in the series, is all about. And at the heart of innovation and the need for innovation is this very important chart here. Don't worry too much about the huge amount of data here. All of this is posted, all my presentations are always posted on the internet site. At the end of the conference, you will have this data. This industry, despite all the mergers and acquisitions, still is highly fragmented. Almost every one of the top companies on this chart has had a major merger or acquisition in the last 5 years, whether it's GSK acquiring Novartis, whether it's Bayer taking over Merck Sharp and Dohme Consumer, Sanofi taking over Boehringer Ingelheim, and yet the top 7 companies still have less than 1/4 of the market. And when you look at the market growth, or rather the sales growth of the big players against market of 4.5%, in historical terms, the growth rate is disappointing because OTC, to the best of my knowledge, is the only consumer segment where the big get smaller. Because market scale says the big should get bigger because they can compete in a different way. They use their buying strength to reduce costs. They use their global representation to achieve synergy. In OTC, it doesn't happen because OTC, or consumer healthcare, is still a local market. Also because although we innovate, we're not very successful at it. The best innovation in terms of sales is through RX to OTC switch. But as one of the great distributors of our industry, Scott Emerson, who runs a $2 billion distribution company in the US, said at one of our conferences, so you take a $3 billion prescription business and you make it a $200 million OTC business and you call that innovation? It's true, isn't it? We're handed it on a plate. We're handled 20 years of market experience. We're handed a lot of clinical trials. And despite spending millions of pounds, dollars, and euros in all the clinical work, at the end of it, we create relatively small consumer businesses. And most recently, very few at all. Switch has not delivered very much in the last 2 years. Flonase was the last really successful switch, and even that is not at the level of the earlier switches, as we'll see in a moment. So where do we look for growth? We look for growth with local players. Here, of our top 100 companies in DB6 that we then put into descending order of growth, and then we take the top slice, you will see that a lot of these are Chinese companies, but still highly innovative. When a company can grow at 30% a year, when the Chinese market overall is growing at less than 7%, they are doing something very successful, and it's not bribery anymore. The days when you could bribe the Chinese Ministry of Health and the SFDA are long since gone. Ever since they took the head of the Chinese FDA out and shot him for corruption, there has been a complete and marked reduction in the amount of corruption in the regulatory process in China. So it's very largely honest, and the companies that do well in China are doing it because they have either large sales forces, clever products, great pricing, great advertising. When we look at companies that in a European context are doing well, we have Oxfam, the top Russian OTC company, has the right products at the right price in full distribution, 17% growth. And our client for 10 years now, iHealth, had its first European launch early this year in the UK. We helped them find their distribution partner here. iHealth, which is the Culturelle business, probiotic, and you'll see more about probiotics in a moment. Probiotics, or rather iHealth, with their Culturelle brand, increasing sales at about 17% a year in US, in China, Korea, Brazil, and now UK, more markets to come. Here's where I make a small plug for our joint venture called the CHC Innovation Connection, who has a fair next door. Please go and see the products there, because we are trying to bring new products from small players into the global context. So we have a number of headwinds. Headwinds is a fabulous expression. It's how you explain bad results. You say, we ran into enormous headwinds. And they were. re-regulation, poor economy. Nobody ever talks about the tailwinds that gave us a free pass. I'll talk about some of the tailwinds in a moment. So you read a lot about headwinds, and we can summarize those, and we know this. The market is saturated. We have the impact of private labels. Where we don't have private label, we have generics. In the EU, we have the short exclusivity for a switch, only 12 months, compared with 3 years in the US, and even there we complain that isn't long enough, rightly so. We have conflicting regulations, especially for supplements. We have coming up changes in the medical devices regulations, and I'm not going to say anything on that because that will be explained by other speakers. And we have competition from food products which are offering health benefits. That's well known, nothing there will surprise you. But we do have some favorable winds, the ones that are making us go faster because they are tailwinds. Governments basically believe in consumer healthcare. They then turn that around somewhat by making the regulations tougher. But in general, governments are encouraging self-care, and you are in a country where the governments have been very supportive of consumer healthcare. UK, New Zealand, Australia in the past, Mexico, Poland, Scandinavia to an extent, Netherlands to an extent, are countries where the governments have said, for minor ailments, the best place is for the patient to become a consumer and to buy in the pharmacy. And they have helped with legislation to encourage that. Sometimes it's removing legislation, as a lot of the free market legislation of the 1980s in the UK was perceived and became very supportive. We see consumers who are more aware of the benefits of consumer healthcare and who are leading the trend, and it is the consumer that's leading the trend towards prevention. So when we look at the global figures, and again, this is no surprises here. I showed this chart in Barcelona, and I've shown it at pretty well every presentation I've made, that in the last 10 years, this market has gone from intervention or treatment, which is black, to prevention, which is red. 10 years ago, this chart would have been, which is a chart of the growth categories in consumer healthcare, or OTC as we called it then, would have been almost all black, because I get sick, I get a medicine, I get better. Now consumers say, keep me on the go. What can I have preventively? And here you have a chart with the #1 probiotic, still at the early stages of its development, as Katya and Steph Kulek will explain. But there are others on this chart, and we're seeing some amazing growth. Vitamin D, come from nowhere. What drives it? We use too much sunscreen. After all the years of being told that we don't use enough SPF, we now use too much. So the body is not getting natural sunlight that can be absorbed and make vitamin D naturally, which of course speeds up the calcium conversion into bones, teeth, and whatever. So we now need supplementation of vitamin D, which is why we have a category globally of $1 billion growing at 10% a year. OTC switch. As I wrote 2 weeks ago in the companion publication OTC Newsflash, the most widely read specialist publication in the consumer healthcare market, I'm proud to say, 10,000 readers. This is my personal hit list or wish list or study list of categories that I think are going to become very hot, mainly driven by switch. Obesity, diabetes, mental health, looking at conditions like ADHD. Sleeping disorders, we don't have the right products at the moment. We've got some good products. There are people in this room who market those products. But I'm looking for the first pharma product that can be switched because it is not addictive. There are some new products coming to market in the prescription phase which may have switch potential in the future. Pain relief through medicated cannabis. In fact, if there are 2 on this list that I would pull out as or maybe 3 that I would pull out as the mega categories of the future, it would be erectile dysfunction, it would be smoking control, with this industry finally coming to terms with e-cigarettes and vaping, which we have to do, and what I think will be the biggest of all is the use of medicated cannabis, mainly for pain, but for other conditions. Now, we need to go through a revolution of regulatory change. We need to understand that medicated cannabis isn't the same as reefers. I hope my Dutch friends here won't mind me saying, but when I got out at the railway stand station in Amsterdam for the ASGP meeting, I was high within about 2 minutes because the air around that station is just so full of cannabis smoke. I was literally off the ground walking to my hotel, you know, and that's a liberal market for cannabis. But there is a medical aspect to this which we are just beginning to see. And at the end of today, we have a presentation, two presentations on the future of medicated cannabis. Other consultants, not ourselves, have given us some amazing figures about the potential. This is multi-billion in terms of potential. Will we as an industry get behind it or not? You know, when I first went to work with the Teva company, when it was a very small company, I went to their headquarters in Israel, and on the desk of the general manager of Teva Consumer was a plaque, and it said there are 3 types of managers. The manager who makes it happen, the manager who watches it happen, and the manager who says what happened. And I honestly think that with some of these mega categories like vaping, medicated cannabis, and even to an extent erectile dysfunction, most of this industry will say, what happened? When did that come? I didn't see that. I didn't expect that. Well, I'm saying today, I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Be part of it. Don't be part of it because you looked at it and decided you don't want to be part of it, but please, for heaven's sake, do not let it come up and say, I didn't know that was going to happen. So that's one of the messages today. Because look at just one of those. The sexual health, which is erectile dysfunction switches, the existing market for contraceptive products, and the conception category, which is also going to be quite big, will be, we think, 15 billion euros in the next 10 years. And it says here, will it be fun? The work that we've done for one of those companies in the early days, our brief was forecast the market, but take out any aspects of fun. What are the switch potential for a medicated product that is to treat a medical condition? And we said 0. But you can have 15 billion if you will allow us to build into the forecast recreation. And they said, no, we don't want recreation in this forecast. So there we are. Our colleagues, and I know we have current and former members of Reckitt Benckiser here, who are making Durex a fun product, which it wasn't under the former owners, and we're seeing some great things happening around the world. Now, erectile dysfunction was pioneered in New Zealand. I think you may have seen this before, but nevertheless, it's always worth saying that when you get a country that will fully liberalize, will allow a product to go over the counter at full strength, which we're not seeing in the rest of the world, making claims and allowing television advertising, well, it happened in New Zealand. This is the content. We're going to see a news clip and then the TV commercial. And for a very small market, the sales have been quite extraordinary. And the ownership of the market is in the hands of entrepreneurs because the big players didn't take part.
A new way of getting medication for erectile dysfunction has seen a big growth in sales of the New Zealand-made drug Sylvester. We're the first country to allow such over-the-counter sales, and while some have concerns the medical issues may not be picked up without a doctor involved, pharmacists say there are protections in place. Mark Hathaway reports.
Being able to walk into a chemist to get your erectile dysfunction medicine instead of sitting down with a doctor appears a popular choice. Since it became available over the counter in October, sales of Sylvester have shot up over 400%.
There's traditionally been huge sales over the internet, so I guess in a way this is maybe replacing a lot of internet sales.
Gore chemist Bernie McCone fought to have Sylvester approved for over-the-counter sales.
There are a lot of blokes out there who have got problems but just have been unsure of how to raise the issue, so I think the reclassification has brought those things forward.
But not everybody is sold on the new method. While the less formal option of popping into the pharmacy appears to be popular with patients, it isn't among the New Zealand Medical Association, who fear issues like cardiovascular disease may not be being picked up in store.
Your current smoker?
Only select pharmacists can prescribe Sylvester, and patients go through a sit-down consultation.
But I think the reclassification has been done with that in mind, to actually force those discussions to take place, because people have been going around saying, yes, I've got the symptoms of not being able to have an erection, but in fact I've got diabetes or high blood pressure contributing to it.
The Medical Association also worries some are obtaining the drug simply for increased sexual performance. The drug company, though, say patient care is paramount.
Our screening program ensures that if they do have an underlying health problem, then they will be immediately referred to their general practitioner.
Around 1 in 8 patients Bernie McCone consults are referred to their GP for a more comprehensive diagnosis. Mark Hathaway, One News.
And this is how the manufacturer, Douglas Pharma, positioned the brand in its TV commercial.
I want to talk to you about something personal, erection problems. Now, in the past, if you wanted a treatment, you had to go and see your doctor. Well, all that's changed. New Zealand's just become the first place in the world where you don't have to see your doctor. You can now go direct to your pharmacist. Just ask for Sylvester. It works the same as those other little blue pills. Your pharmacist will give you a checkup, and if Sylvester's right for you, you're good to go. Easy, right? Sylvester, the little blue pill, now direct to you from your pharmacist.
And very smart packaging, somehow managing to have the letter V on the package. That's a nice link to Viagra. Another trend in the marketplace is natural products, and I know from the requests we're getting from our clients to study the natural market that there is high interest. And it's not surprising. Again, I showed this data in Barcelona, but it's worth saying it again, that if we take the European market and we look at a fairly arbitrary figure, it's $25 million or about just over 20 million euros, we've got 200 brands in region Europe, including Russia, that meet that sales criteria, and of them, 14 have growth of over 20%. Now that's good, because the image of Europe worldwide is that this is a no-growth market, and you cannot launch new brands, and you cannot get high growth. But we see brands that have achieved that. So in the natural space, Grantos, a natural remedy, is growing by 20% a year and is at almost 50 million euros. We'll see a few more examples a little later on. And then we're also, in our global industry, we're seeing the beginning of the movement to adjacent categories. Now, when I say the beginning of the movement, it's like saying Columbus discovered America. Well, America was there already. It's just the starting point. So a lot of these medical devices, or rather a lot of these adjacencies were already there. It's just we're beginning to see them and bring them into the definition. But here is definitely something new. Well, new in the sense of the United States. The US has just discovered the TENS device, which we've had in the rest of the world for many, many years, for about 20 in fact. And pain brands in the US have brought in the TENS devices. They've added some new features like Wi-Fi control, which is very nice. And it's heading to be something like a $100 million category. Very high priced products, premium products, very interesting. And we'll talk more about medical devices and adjacencies during the course of today. And then the whole area in terms of new distribution, recognizing and moving into new sectors from the point of view of distributing either physically in retail or electronically in terms of the internet or multi-level, recognizing that that is an important part of our industry. Amway has for many years been the world's biggest distributor of branded vitamin products. They have sales of almost 2 billion in China alone. It's sensational. But we can't measure it because it doesn't come up in any of the audits. We're beginning to see some data from China, but it's not totally reliable. But we get the Amway figures from their annual report. Unfortunately, we don't have all the other data to make it into a market study. So here's some preliminary work we've done. And I just draw your attention to the bottom right. The rest of this is fairly obvious, like penetration of mobile phones and the internet. That's in the public domain. But we've done some work that if you take the broader consumer healthcare market that includes e-commerce and multi-level, and then you take the e-commerce share, it is already 11% of the market. In fact, in countries like Germany, it's almost 20% already. There's a lot there going on below the surface that we are not recognizing as essentially a retail industry. And the forecast is that that share of e-commerce will approach 20% by the year 2025 and will be $25 billion of sales. Let's put that into context. That's like saying, of the 50 states of the United States, take 35 of them and say that's a new market. Or take all of region Europe except Russia, and that's a totally new market added to our figures. And yet, When I talk to my clients about internet and e-commerce, we are at such a low level of entry. I ask my clients, are you involved in e-commerce or internet marketing? Yeah, I've got an app. Well, hold on, 10 years ago, having an app was state of the art. Today, it's not state of the art. Apps have to do more than just say, here's my product, buy me. It has to give you diagnostic capability. It has to give you an alert. And some of our brands do that. Allergy alerts, for example. But that's still very crude compared with what it could be and what we're seeing in other consumer sectors. So, bringing this part of the presentation to an end with just a few more minutes before we go specifically into probiotics, let's now look at what most of us think of as innovation, which is formulation. Now, we have a product in our company called OTC New Products Tracker. We've been doing this for 3 years? A bit more than that. 2013. We have 15,000 entries in terms of new brands launched in that period. And here we have some analysis. And I'm going to draw your attention to the fact that Europe launches more products than any other part of the world. And yet, actually, those products make almost no impression on the marketplace. Europe is not the place you go if you want to find sources of successful new products. So we have lots of activity. We have very little delivery. We have a huge amount of, and this is global, we have a huge amount of new products launched in VMS, vitamins, minerals, and supplements. 40% of all the new launches were in vitamins, which is not growing particularly well as a result of it. Derma, which is one of our weakest growth categories, has the second highest number of launches. Now, we give a starring system. A 4-star innovation would be really new, and it would be a switch, or it would be something that had never been thought of before, and only 1% of those 15,000 entries gets a 4-star rating. 6% gets a 3-star rating, and 93% get the rating. Yeah, okay. That's a worry, isn't that a worry? That 93% of our launches are 2-star, 1-star. I don't think we have 0 stars. We ought to have a 0-star because some of them are almost destructive, I think, some of the new products launched. But here are a few that look really interesting. Viagra Connect, 4-star, because in Europe this is, for the brand, this is a very successful launch, and it comes with a great program of patient reassurance through pharmacists. Maloff Protect, we gave an award at the Barcelona conference because this is an innovative new product. It's the first OTC malaria treatment, malaria prevention, I should say. Swiss Cannabis Gum, we gave 3-star because this is an important new category. And Cocoa Via from Mars, because for a confectionery company to be launching a product that offers the benefits of cocoa in terms of cardiovascular is very important. When we look at launches, I'm not going to go into all the detail, but we look at the most successful new launches. In the United States, in the last year, the most successful new launch, Flonase Sensimist, an important line extension for the Flonase line, but only 36 million of sales. Differen, we've had presentations from Nestle, in which they said this has been fantastic, but you can read the number, 17 million for the first significant new product in acne treatment in 30 years. Something went wrong. We have lots of growth brands in the US. I'm not going into the detail. Look at the European figures. No big sales. Neosine Forte from Aflofarm, which succeeds by mass advertising, 10 million of sales. Other than that, very small. Existing brands that are increased through new products or marketing investment, 4 of them are Russian. France gave us the 5th. Theolose from Thea, the eye drop. Successful because of the marketing to opticians. This is preservative-free. It won't damage your patient's retinas. Send them to the pharmacy to buy this product. It's a premium price product. It has 20%. It has 49% growth rate, and it's now running at 43 million. 49% growth, 43 million of sales. When you look at others, and I showed these at Barcelona, Snoop from Schneider, 360-degree relaunch, capitalizing on the great point-of-sale strength of Schneider with its large sales force. Bronco stock from the Quisler company in Austria, licensed out to Perrigo and other companies. Great sales, 47% growth with its wet and dry cough, offering whatever your cough is, we've got the solution in a single product. We had 2 years ago, we had the presentation from Omnibiotic on their line of probiotic products. We'll perhaps see a bit more of that later. And the daddy of them all, Voltaren, the most successful OTC brand, still growing at 11% a year based on that ethical heritage, pharmacy recommendations, consumer engagement, and very, very well-targeted new product development. So, we need to look in the right place for growth. We need to embrace the adjacencies. We need to find ways of entering the channels of distribution which are already there, but we have not fully penetrated. If we can do that, we can get our industry to achieve a growth rate of 10%. As far as today is concerned, the adjacencies are all important. And as I showed you from the earlier chart, in terms of growth globally, probiotics is number 1. In Europe, it would be number 3, but still a very high growth rate. So I'm going to ask you, Katarina Panteleva, the Group Vice President for Consultancy Division, to take us through some slides on probiotics and introduce our guest speaker, Steph Kulek from Be My Eye. So that's my part of the presentation. Thank you for listening. I'll be doing the summing up later on. I don't think we're going to have time for questions, but I'm around. Over to Katja.
Thank you, Nicholas. Morning. Nicholas has done the introduction. I'm Katya Panteleva, VP of Nicholas Hall Group of Companies, responsible for consultancy in Asia, Europe, North America, and Latin America, and my wonderful consultancy team is here today. Let me get a few slides out. Right. Just take a second. Right, probiotics. So our consultancy team, we receive a lot of requests in probiotic space, and that's not surprising because that's the fastest growing category globally, and the category already has scale. It's 3 billion euros globally, and local companies, regional companies, multinational companies, everyone is interested in this category, how to take this category further. And still the biggest markets for this category are the US, China, Japan, Italy, Russia, and Brazil. So, and what we do in this space, as an example, we work with portfolio. We help companies to identify how to enter the category, how to take it to the next level, or how to develop their portfolio. And one of the ways to split the category, probiotics category, is to split it by the areas of application or the need states. And what you see on this slide is we take clusters, areas of application covered by probiotics, and split that into those areas which are well developed, well established, well received and accepted by consumers, and the number of probiotics products is huge in this area. Then there are areas of applications which are developing and emerging. Well, obviously still the core of the category is within the gastrointestinal space and GI cluster, and even within that cluster, there are some areas which are developing, like constipation and IBS. And quite often the companies, they enter the market with that positioning in gut health. And there is an example on a German market product called Kijimia, and they built the brand, and that's one of the biggest brands in Germany right now. So they built the brand with positioning in IBS. And what's also unique about this product is they rely on direct-to-consumer promotion only. Our network partner in Germany says, Variable says, it's not very sustainable because high investments and once you're off the TV, you cannot sustain the growth. So, but they've managed to build business without doctors, and that also proves that consumers can get the concept, which is beyond the classic gut health, and get the IBS positioning. One of the most developed clusters after gut health is immune health, and within that cluster there is an area which is worth attention if you're developing your portfolio. There's definitely allergy, if we look at that as an inappropriate immune response, and it's great if probiotics could develop in this area and actually intervene the root causes of allergy rather than addressing the symptoms. And together with Jennifer Cooper, we'll work a lot in these areas, showing the companies what the opportunities are, what's the strength of the current clinical studies, and what's the future of these clusters. And Jennifer will be presenting more than probiotics, on microbiota today. Then there is a cluster within probiotics which is also underdeveloped, that's women's health. And in general, women's health is a neglected area in consumer healthcare, something which goes beyond being packaged, but actually does support women and women's health. And probiotics is a great category to address this cluster and support women in various issues women are dealing with. Another cluster in probiotics which is also developing, we do see products in the market and much more can be done here, is a cluster called mother and the baby. So that's when a mother and the baby are supported with probiotics at the different stages of development. And of course, when you take these clusters as an example, and you develop that, you go into the competition with other categories like typical VMS. So definitely, we don't say here that that's a completely empty space, mother and baby. There are other products in the area, but so much more can be done with probiotics. Another hot cluster within probiotics is the cluster called metabolic reconditioning. And we always draw companies' attention to this cluster along with immunity and allergy. So metabolic reconditioning, gut composition of overweight people is different, and here we rely on the hypothesis that probiotics can interfere and change that. And when this cluster is developed, and this is going to develop in future, it's going to have huge implications on consumer healthcare. And it's about, are you in or out, or are you working on this cluster or not? But that's great timing to work on this category and develop portfolio. And then there are many other conditions and areas of applications covered by probiotics, conditions like skin health, oral health, heart health, physical performance, mental health, aging, pain, beauty from within. And actually, even though the probiotics category has scale, we still think that it's at the very early stage of development. Now, there is so much more to come in the future. It did start as an adjacent category and now has become one of the core categories. Now, Nicholas has already mentioned that we have a great tool called Nicholas Hall New Products Tracker. So if we look at the innovations in probiotics globally, there are so many conversations about launching products for women in probiotics, for oral health, physical performance. Still, 70% of all the launches globally are within the classic gut health and immune health. Now, we understand all the challenges with claims and competition with other categories, but still there are lots of conversations, but the core of the market is still gut health and immune health, which means there's so much opportunity to explore and introduce products with proven efficacy, that's the point, to consumers. And as marketeers are working on developing the portfolio, let's have a look at what's happening with products currently marketed, right? Currently being at the point of sale. Let's have a look at the level of execution at the recommendation with the products already distributed at the points of sale. And to do so, I would like to invite Stefan Kulik from BMI to present the insights of the research completed specifically for this conference, and it's just shared for the first time here. Stefan, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I just want to explain, before I cover anything else, just who I am and how we work with Nicholas. So my name is Steph Kulik. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for a company called BMI. We work as a partner to the Nicholas Hall companies, and what we specialise in is, if I take something that Nicholas was talking about 5 minutes ago, we specialise in taking something that has been a real headwind for us as an industry, and we turn it into what is truly now a tailwind. Specifically, we allow the pharma industry to measure all components of execution, how OTC, CHC products go to market to be bought by a consumer. We allow the execution of that to be measured in absolutely granular insights in 20 plus countries around the world, in hundreds of thousands of pharmacies, and we use a crowd of 1 million people to do that. I'll go on to explain a little bit behind it. Now, in preparation for this conference today, what we've looked at specifically is probiotics. I'm going to show you a very brief snapshot of some data. This will be complemented by a much fuller report that's going to be published exclusively through the Nicholas Hall companies. If anyone has any questions, of course, please shout out. So, first of all, one of the things that we recognise is that in pharma, a huge challenge to overcome when we talk about the execution of a new probiotic, an old probiotic, a new category, is that what we often consider or should be simple to do in terms of execution is very much not easy. So making sure that what we pay to put into a store actually happens. Making sure that it's available, making sure that the merchandisers do the right job, making sure that a new product is available 100% on day one. Now, in order to try and take control of that, typically what pharma clients say to us is that they will take responsibility for looking at different things within the pharmacy, and these are the things that we want to test. So for something like probiotics, we know that what matters, so the presence of products, distribution, we know the unmissable visibility of it, they are important. But actually for products in the OTC and CHC environment, we know that everything comes down to this final stage, so recommendation. We generally understand that across all the OTC categories that we work in, I myself worked at Johnson & Johnson for 10 years. 70% is the general level of all of those products where the final sale is recommended to a consumer. So if as a group of companies, if we're trying to establish products that have very specific roles or are emerging or are new products to the market, getting this right is absolutely critical, but we have to measure whether it actually happens or not. Now, what is very interesting is that when we look at immense areas of the industry today, the gaps between what we would want to happen and what actually happens are huge. These are numbers from anonymised, enormous healthcare companies that Nicholas showed very recently, where having gone in store to execute enormous new pieces of NPD, even within a week of that execution happening, the standard to which recommendation is being completed for that supplier has dropped by an unbelievable degree. Now that's why these companies want to take a much tighter control of what is actually happening in terms of the execution of a brand, so that they can understand at this very granular level, where do I need to go and take an action to make it better. So when we look at the probiotics category in particular, there are a few very interesting things that we see. I'm sure when you look at the brands and you have the understanding of the market you do, you'll see that the brand shares tend to match up to the recommendation shares. It's not a consistent picture. So in every country we have naturally variances in the brands that are the most recommended when someone goes and speaks to a pharmacist. Now, how we get to this research is that this is thousands of people going in to do an objective mystery shop in store to say to a pharmacist, I want to take something that will help me holistically and proactively better care for my gut health. What brand do you recommend, for example? This is a very, very objective check. Now, what you see is the fragmentation is relatively similar. The brand portfolio is very different. What each of these suppliers and the data that you'll see in the full report, what you're able to understand underneath this is who are all of the second and third players. And when you actually use the service at its most detailed level, how does that vary territory to territory for a rep? How does that vary store to store within that territory? As well as the reasons, well, why is Dicaflor in Poland, why is that recommended? And critically, in the stores that it's not recommended, why is it not recommended? So this is the level of insight we are able to generate. Now, when you start to drill down within the country, we'll just look at the UK very quickly, you start to see some really interesting insights. So this would not be a huge surprise to anyone in the UK, but 57% of all recommendations are for Boots own label products. If we look across the industry, when we look at the different spread of the pharmacists that are covered, 40% Boots, 30% Lloyds, 30% independent pharmacy, the reasons for recommending a probiotic product across that mix of stores has these as its most powerful components. So people are recommending, yes, good value for money. They're recommending on a high number of active organisms. Actually, good reputation remains the most powerful driving factor in a recommendation. So even if you think of a market like the UK, where the private label brands of Boots are very, very strong and you can consider them a brand, if you are a branded product entering that market or seeking to increase your share in the market, your tailwind is actually very good, because the number one reason for a pharmacist to recommend a product is down to the reputation of the brand. It just means that you have to do a very good job of educating them as to why your reputation is as strong or stronger than the Boots private label. Okay. Now, this is the kind of insight that until today has been impossible to access. And without that kind of insight, that's part of the reason why we never get the returns that we want, because we launch products without being able to test and prove in each country, in each territory, in each store, where am I being successful and where am I not being successful. Okay? Now, in the process of how we do this, and as I said, the full report will come out through the Nicholas Hall company to allow you to access the data at a much more granular level. How we do this is through an app-based technology. Nicholas made this point earlier on. It's no point just having an app. It has to do something very productive. What we provide is a platform to pharma companies that allows you to test for any OTC product, the level of recommendation, and if it is relevant for you, display and distribution as well, so that you can really understand at the most granular level what is going on and where your gaps lie. Now, the way that that is done is through something that allows us to very tightly control the output you get back. It is all done through an app to a group of 1 million people across Europe. It means that they select a mission that a pharmacy client gives us, they go to a location, they complete the mission in the store, checking the things that you would ask them to check. They make some money from that, because that's how crowds work. We have to pay them something to do it. And it means that what you have reported back is a set of consistent, continuous KPIs. So recommendation, distribution, display. The top part is, for us, for the observations we have in pharmacy, this is the silver bullet that has never been measured before. This is a unique capability that we deliver through Nicholas Hall. So all of these different components, they give you that you will see this for probiotic. You have similar studies that we have already run from a number of other categories. Today, this work is being done across around about 20,000 different initiatives in the pharmacy industry. So the interest from the client base to want to understand this stuff, to define it, and to be able to take a much more powerful control of execution is coming through very strongly for us. As I said, that is a very brief introduction to what you'll see with the greater release that comes from Nicholas Hall, but that is a brief introduction to the start. So any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, thank you. Another great presentation from Be My Eye. When we saw Luca with the original presentation in Barcelona, certainly the audience was very captured by that. And again, you've shown us something that really does help to push probiotics in the right direction, we hope. But that all-important reputation is clear in a category like that. Can I ask if there are any questions from the floor? Yeah, can you, Alexis, can you wait for the microphone, which is just coming to you?
So thank you for an excellent presentation.
Sure.
May I ask the question about the brand? Is it the manufacturing brand of reputation, or is it the brand? Because a lot of these new areas will maybe have new brands coming in.
Yes.
And so how would you reflect on that?
It's a very good question. So the research that we have done as in conjunction with Nicholas as a white paper is at a generic level of I want a better gut health outcome. What do you recommend? How the research is done, because it is done in store by an individual according to the scope of what you want, how most of our pharma clients use us is to test specific brands. So of course, for a brand you own, you go in and the general information that we would provide, clients often want to understand a couple of things. So they want to know at an unprompted level, if I go in and say, I want to have better gut health, what is the unprompted brand that the pharmacist recommends? They'll often then want to know the second unprompted brand. So our researcher, our member of the public, they would say to the pharmacist, oh, that's an interesting one, what else do you recommend? If at that point the manufacturer's brand still hasn't been recommended, they would then want us to prompt and say, okay, those were both really interesting, but my friends have told me about XLS Medical or whatever. What do you think of that brand? Now, what we then code at that moment is we get responses from all of the pharmacists on, for the manufacturer's brand, why is it recommended? Or if the pharmacist says that at that point, I don't recommend that brand, we get the reasons why they don't. So it means for you as a manufacturer, you get this very, very granular understanding of both your strengths and opportunities, but also because you see all the unprompted stuff, you see the whole marketplace as well. Okay?
I've lost my microphone, so I will try to project. Here it comes. In terms of probiotics, have you done any research of this nature, looking at the different strains? I mean, are people looking for lactobacillus or bifidus or one of the more extreme strains of probiotics? Or is that stage 2 for you?
It would be stage 2. So in a number of other categories within OTC, we have quite complex connected strands of recommendation we've been asked to look at more in that territory. So pain is a good category where, for example, we have lots of branches of what we've been asked to look at. The work we do in probiotics is more in its infancy. I think that marries up to where the industry is. But I think it would be fully anticipatable that those more precise pieces that people want to start to understand, that would be the second wave we expect to see. The comparison I would give is that in Nicholas put up a fabulous brand example earlier in Voltarol. We have a lot of companies that for years have asked us to look into pain recommendation levels. A lot of those companies supply their product purely via a pill or a capsule. One of their greatest challenges is that they have a new entrant that is a completely different delivery mechanism. So actually when those very established partners talk to us about wanting to track their recommendation levels in pain, yes, they want to know their recommendation, but they have also wanted to then go and look at what causes recommendation for Voltarol, because they know that the delivery mechanism is different and they want to see how that affects them.
Thank you, that's very interesting. In fact, talking about Voltarol or Voltaren, as most of our European neighbours know it, or Voltadol, I was actually in Austria yesterday talking to their industry association about switches and success and failures. And Voltaren has to be one of the biggest successful switches ever. Out of interest, I added up all the sales since we started tracking it worldwide back in 1996. And of course, that was 9 years into Voltaren's OTC existence from its switch in 1985. From 1996 to the end of last year, Voltaren's sales were nearly ruined that by over-exaggeration. 5.6 billion euros over that period, and the brand is still growing. As Nicholas says, that new product development has helped a lot. And to look at the sales graph, where you can see when they introduced the new 2% 12-hour version back in 2012, and it just goes up like that. And this is a brand which switched in 1985, and it continues to grow, which is such an achievement based on consumer-relevant innovation and getting it past the regulators, which, of course, is the other half of what we're talking about today. So thank you so much for that, and to Katya and to Nicholas. I would just say that if you look at the products in OTC New Products Tracker, we see what's happened to the products that launch. If you, by any chance, you're one of the subscribers to OTC New Directions, you will find that we go back a stage. Each week we cover the latest research looking at probiotics and many other categories as they come to market. So we're including things like probiotics for bone health, which could, if they take off, as two of the major probiotics players expect, could have real negative implications for all those calcium supplement marketers. So it's worthwhile looking and planning. And we quite like to check the number of people who check the research that we so carefully go through. My colleague Nicola, one of the mic holders, and Kirsten, both in the room and researching each week. We know just how many people click to the source and how interested you are in the probiotics particularly. Thanks very much indeed to all three of you. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.